Hello everyone, welcome to another coding tutorial. In the previous lecture, you should have learned about methods, and in this coding tutorial, we are going to start creating them to help you connect the dots versus what I covered in the lecture to how you actually apply it in your code. So let's go ahead and jump in. In this case, I just created my Java file to be methods.java just to pretty much let us know what's going on in our code. And I basically already set it up, our standard main method in there and placing some commas for or comments for some of the things we will be covering in today's coding tutorial. One thing I would note is because I know I use print statements a lot, you see that I have my print statement in the comments below. It's basically just there for me to easily reuse my comments later on, so that I don't have to constantly type in that long print statement every time I need to work with my code. So now that we have our environment set up, we can jump right in. So the main thing in this portion is creating our methods. And again, our methods are going to be created outside of our main method. So our main method is here, and you see we are going to start our code under our main method. Now, remember there are different ways that you can create methods, but we'll go ahead and start with our generics. So public, we're going to do static, and then for this first example, we are going to do our void. So our method one is going to be a void method. And remember, it's basically going to return no value, and it just does a action. All right, so we're not using our return statement. So we have public, static, void, and in this case, we could say print message. All right. So after you give it a name, so right now our return type is void, our method name is print message, and we give it parentheses followed by curly braces. So that is your method structure right there. You should have your public static followed by your data type or your return type, which is void in this case, meaning we're not returning anything, followed by your method name with the parentheses and the curly braces. So this is a standard syntax you need to use with your methods. Now, we have our method created, but we need actions to happen in our method. And in this case, we say we are printing a message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my pre-written out print statement from down here, and I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in to my method. So now basically our method would be printing something out, and then we could say this is my first method in Java. All right. So that is an example of how you can create a method in Java, or at least a void method. So in this case, you see that we only have one thing going on in this example. So now that we have a method, I'm going to show you the important part about remembering to always call your method. So if I were to run this, you see I'm running my code. It says build success, but we see nothing has come out. Nothing was shown to us because we never called this method. We only created it. So this is showing you the importance of that main thing that I mentioned in the lecture, was that if you write methods, you have to call them. So you can write millions of methods, but if you never call them, you'll never see that action happen. So that's what we have to do now. So to call our methods, we must go to our main method. Because our main method is basically our powerhouse. That's where our code is running from. That is where it's all coming into play at. So, to call the method, all right, we would simply go into the main, and then we would provide the name of the method we want to call. And in this case, it's print message. We need to follow that by parentheses, and we need to follow it by a semicolon. So if you see our method call here, immediately highlights our method here. So it knows that when it sees this, it's going to find this because we have provided it the same exact structure as this. We don't have anything in our parentheses. We don't have anything in our parentheses here, and our names match. So now we will save and run this code. So when we run it, you see it's running, build success, and then we have our print statement. This is my first method in Java. So this shows you how to create a simple action method. Now, you can have as many things as you want in this method. In this case, I technically only put it one print statement, but technically I can do as many things as I want. I could have asked the user for input here. I could have, had some sort of scanner running inside of here. I could have had multiple sentences printing out. Again, you want to try to match your method name to what's going on in your method, but technically, you can write as many lines of code as you want inside of your method, and when you call it, all of those lines of code would run. But I just wanted to show you a quick, simple example of a voided method. Now, if we go into our second method type, so we have method 2, and this one is going to do the value returning method. And we're going to use a data type and the return statement. Oops. All right. So again, we're going to start off our method with public static. And in this case, because we are returning a value, we have to give it a data type that we are returning. So we will just say int in this example. And we're going to say add numbers. All right. So here we are going to add numbers. So first, we need to put in some sort of return statement because it's looking for that. So we could say return. And we are going to put the return statement last. But I'm just placing that there so that we can remember. In this case, we have to return a value. And you see we are getting a error. And it's basically saying there that we're missing the return value, which we know because we haven't placed anything there. So inside of here, there are two ways you technically can use this method. So we could use parameters, or we can just simply add numbers in here somewhere. So for example, we could do a variable and creating a local variable. So we could say int x equals 45. And this is local variable 1. Then we could say int y equals, let's say 23. And this will be our local variable number 2. And remember, they only exist inside of this method. So if we were to do a print statement outside of this method with these variables, it would not work. And to show you that, I will go ahead and run an example now so you can kind of get an idea. But in this case, we technically can't do it without returning the value. So we'll go ahead and do x plus y. So you see now everything's good to go because we are going to return our value there. All right. So here we have another method, and again, for us to use it, we have to call it. But to give you an idea, we're going to do our print statement again, but we're going to try to print out that variable x that we have there. So you see we have this variable x. So if I were to come to my main method, place my print statement, and then do the variable x, you see I immediately get an error because x does not exist. So you see it says create a local variable x or create a parameter x. Again, creating a local variable x would create a variable x inside of the main method. So if I were to do this here, you see it immediately created a variable inside of our main method, which is local. A local variable means anything inside of these two braces, the brace here and the brace here. So anything inside of here that is a variable will be considered a local variable, just like this. This is an example of local variables. So that's just to show you that when they are in different curly braces, they are technically local variables and they cannot be seen outside. For us to use it outside, we would have had to create it in our main method or out in this empty space somewhere where it could be used by everything. But that's just showing you the example of local variables, so I will delete this for now that you've seen how that works. So now we want to run our method that we created, which was add numbers, and we are going to go ahead and run it. So let's go ahead and test it, and we're going to run it. And you see it says this is my first method in Java. Now, take note that you do not see the return value of add numbers. We are not getting an error anywhere where it's saying that this did not run. Technically, this ran, but the reason we're not seeing anything is because we technically never used the value. We're just saying to run the method, but we're not saying where this return value goes, so nothing happens because we didn't say to print it. So, for example, if we wanted to print that value, we could have done it one of two ways. The first way is to place it inside of a print statement, as such. Try it like this. Command. Give me a second here. All right, move that. And we're basically saying there that we want to print the returned value of add numbers. Okay, so we'll go ahead and test this one out first. Run our file. And here you see we have a value of 68. So that is where it is returning our value, is because we're saying we want to print out the return value. Another thing we could have done in this case was put it into x. So we could have said here, int x equals add numbers. And then we could have had another print statement. Oops. Let me copy that from down here, save us some time. So we get our print statement, we come here, and we place x. And what are we doing here? Printing the stored value returned from add numbers. All right, and this time, technically, we should see two values of the same thing. We run it, and now you see we have 2 68s. So that shows you how to create a value returning method and how to actually see the results. So again, you have to either assign it to a variable to be held and used later, or place it into a print statement for it to be seen. That's a very important component when you are working with value returning methods. So we've technically covered our two main types of methods. And another thing we could do is method overloading. So remember, there are the case where we can have parameters as well. So we're going to test that out. All right. So we're going to use parameters in this method, but we are going to use method overloading with add numbers. So again, we're going to create it public static or int in this case, add numbers. All right. And we need to follow that with our parentheses and our curly braces as such. All right. So now that we have that, we need to pretty much put something in this to make it different. So you see we're getting an error, excuse me. And if we hover, we see our error states that add numbers with empty parentheses is already defined in the methods that we're using. So it's giving us an error. In order for us to have a different result, we would have to give it parameters. So in this case, we'll say int x, we'll say int y, and we'll say int z. Or actually, let's just start with 2. So immediately once we do that, you see it's basically saying we're good to go. And in this case, we're getting this because we don't have a return statement because we haven't done anything with it yet. In this case, we could simply go in and state return, and we have the 2 parameters, so we need to say what those parameters are in our method. In our parameters, we say x and y. So we need to state x plus y. And now we then have a new method, and we are using method overloading, but in this case, we're using parameters. So to test this out, again, what we would do is we would print out our data value. So we'll go here and grab this print statement, and we'll put a comment, testing method overloading. And in front of that, I'm going to place my print statement here. Now, right now, we are not testing our methods that we overloaded. We're testing our original add number method because you see here, we have empty parentheses. This means that's this method here, the one that has empty parentheses. If we want to test this one, we have to place in the 2 parameters or the 2 arguments when we're calling it up here. So we need to give it 2 arguments, which will then replace the parameters. So let's give it 2 values. We'll say 10, and then you need to follow the structure here. So the first value we put in is 10, and 10 would replace x, so order matters. So we'll say 10, which is going to replace our x, comma, because that's what comes next, and then let's say like 54. All right, so 10 would replace our x, and you see here it's highlighting add numbers. Why? Because it knows that this method here accepts 2 parameters, and this is another method call that is stating the method with 2 parameters. So that is how it knows to choose this one instead of this one, because this one has no parameters. And if you see here, it immediately highlighted our values in our main method with no parameters. But when we come here, it immediately highlights the one with our 2 parameters because it knows based on the values we gave it. All right, so now that we have that, we have 2 arguments. So I'll put here with 2 arguments. And this is just for your purposes so that you can kind of understand how this all connects. So when we are going to run this, we'll go ahead and test it out. And you see there, we get the value of 64. So technically we have 2 methods and they're overloaded. Now remember, there was another thing I stated with your return statements. So again, if we were to say run a print statement in here, which we're going to try out. If we place it after our return statement, you see we're already starting to get an error, but in this case, I'll just put something there, and we're getting an error. Why are we getting an error? It says unreachable statement. The reason it is unreachable is because your code immediately knows if it hits a return statement, nothing else is going to happen after the return statement. So you cannot place anything after the return statement. However, let's see what happens if we put it in front of our return statement. So we're going to cut this out and paste it somewhere else. So let's see if we go in front. All right, you see there's no issues there. Let's say this is a overload method. Oops. All right, so we have a print statement, and we're going to say we want to return x plus y. We can run this. Let's see. And there you have it. You see our print statement runs. It's telling us this is an overloaded method, and it's giving us a value. So that is something you could also do as well. So just keep that in mind. Now, I've shown you pretty much the two ways that you can create your methods, including with parameters and without parameters. But I will show you one more way to use methods just to show you how the concepts connect to the other things we've covered so far. So we're just going to name it methods with conditionals. All right. So in this case, we will do public static void, and then we'll say work conditions. All right. And we're just going to go ahead and set up our overall method frame as such. So, we've covered loops, we covered conditionals, and now we know methods are used to pretty much block codes together or put codes together. So that's what we are going to do here. So we're going to work with conditionals. So in this case, let's say we're going to create two variables, and we could say int, or actually we can use parameters because now we know how to work with different things. So we'll say int x, right? Now, inside of our method, we're going to say that we're going to create a local variable called int num, and we're going to give it some value. So we'll say equals 24, for example. Now that we have that, we could easily say here, all right, I want to use this number in some way. So what we could say is we can create a if statement to check the numbers. So we could say if x is equal to num, we are going to, and we're going to print something out. So I'm going to grab my statement here, place it in here. We could say, all right, the numbers are equal. Now remember, we can also use our else statement. So I'll come here, we'll say else. We could say the numbers are different. Okay? So this is a conditional inside of our method, and we are using a parameter, and we have our local variable here. So again, we're not necessarily returning a value because we're stating void. So it doesn't need a return statement in this case because we're not saying that it's returning a value. Because in this case, we're saying we want to print stuff out. Now, could we have returned a value? Yes. But do you necessarily always have to return a value when you're using a method? No. Even if you technically would be trying to return a value. So here we'll go ahead and run this. So we have work conditions and it's going to accept one parameter. So in this case, because we don't have a return type, we could just simply state work conditions. And in this case, we have to put in our parameter, so we'll give it a value of 12. All right, everything's good to go. So that is where we're calling it at the top, and this is our method down here at the very bottom. Okay, so to save it, we're going to run and then test this out. And then now you see it has printed out the numbers are different. So you see in here, in this method, we are using a conditional to do another action or to do our action. So you can use and combine the different things we have learned up to this point in your methods, including using a scanner for input, using your conditionals, using a loop. So if you wanted a loop to happen in a method, you can have a loop happen in the method. But basically, as long as they are enclosed in the braces of the method, and you see the other ones highlighted here, it belongs to that method. So all of this is local to this work condition method. Therefore, we cannot see anything that happens in this code or in this method unless we call it. So if we never call it, it is never seen. And this is pretty much how you work with methods. So I don't want to pretty much get you all, thinking too much about it because it really is simple. It's just basically about organizing your code. So even working with it and organizing your code, you can constantly call that method over and over again. So we don't necessarily have to constantly keep typing in the code to do a certain action. Now that we have the method for it, we can reuse that method as many times as we need to do whatever action we need to do. And in this case, we could say we want to do the work conditions again. And in this case, we know that our number here is 24. So if we were to put it up here, we could say 24. We could then call it one more time, work conditions. And then we can give it another number. We'll say 100. All right. And we'll go ahead and test this out and run it. And we should see our output here. And you see there, we get 3 different outputs. The numbers are different, the numbers are equal, and the numbers are different. So you see, we basically ran this block of code 3 times, but we only wrote it once. And that is the good part about methods. It's saving you a lot of time, and it's making your overall program code smaller in numbers. So you see, imagine if we had to constantly retype this, then our code could have been at easily 80 lines of code. So that is the good thing about methods. It's helping you save coding space, but it's also helping you save time, and you can constantly just reuse the method as many times as you want and give it as many different values as you can. So those are the benefits of methods. So I'll stop it right here because, again, I don't want to get too complex into methods, but this is overall the way you create, use, implement methods using your parameters, arguments, returning data types, returning nothing. This is the benefit of methods. So going forward, I really do hope that you all will begin using methods to organize your code and even reuse your code in ways that would be helpful to you. This is one of the standards of a lot of coding. So Again, this is an important concept for you all to nail down. So I encourage you all to practice this. First copy what I've done here, and then, of course, try it out on your own. Test to see what you can get done on your end and see how to apply methods further. Again, as always, I recommend that you do additional research on the topic, but I'm here to provide you the basics to get started, to understand, and to be able to start coding in Java very quickly. So hopefully this tutorial was easy and straight to the point. Hopefully it was easy to grasp and understand after showing you these different examples of methods. And as always, I appreciate your time and I look forward to seeing you in our next lecture.